I cannot. Lady Diana Klein's breath caught as the prince's lips brushed her gloved knuckles. Not a polite, fleeting salute, a lingering claim, and across the imperial ballroom, the Duke of Ashford crushed his crystal goblet so hard the stem snapped like bone. The crack rang sharper than the violins. Every head turned toward his grace. Because Duke Spencer Hector did not react in public. He did not bleed. Yet there it was, wine and blood sliding down his palm as he stared at the prince with an expression the Tun had only seen on battlefields. Prince Gregory Duncan lowered Diana's hand as though he had every right to touch what belonged to another. His smile was careless, enjoying the theater. Diana did not pull away fast enough, not because she welcomed it, but because she felt the power of the moment like a blade at her throat. She was a duchess by ink, a wife by decree, and until this instant, nothing more than a contract dressed in silk. The Duke moved. Not quickly, he never hurried. He advanced through the glittering crowd with that cold, measured stride that made men step aside and women forget to breathe. A black figure cut from discipline, metals catching the chandelier light like warnings. Diana's pulse hammered beneath her corset, because 6 months ago she would have watched him approach without fear. 6 months ago he would not have come at all. He stopped before her, close enough that the heat of his body pressed into her awareness, close enough to smell the sharpness of his cologne and the faint metallic edge of blood. "Your Highness," Spencer said, voice low, flawless, as if he were not one heartbeat away from violence. Gregory's eyes flicked to the ruined goblet in Spencer's hand, then to the blood. His gaze gleamed with satisfaction. "Ashford," the prince drawled, "how devoted you appear tonight." Spencer did not look at Diana, yet she felt his attention on her like a hand at her waist, possessive, furious, terrifying. "Duchess," he said at last. The single word landed heavy. Not Diana, not my wife. Duchess, like a title he had purchased and kept at arm's length. She made herself lift her chin. In that heartbeat she understood the trap the prince had set. If she stepped away from Gregory too sharply, the court would whisper she had been tempted. If she stayed too still, they would whisper she enjoyed it. And if the Duke claimed her publicly after half a year of treating her like a stranger, the court would whisper something far worse. That the cold Duke had finally discovered he could be wounded. Spencer's gaze slid to Gregory's mouth, then back to Diana's hand. It was not rage alone. It was hunger, need, something brutal and unfamiliar behind his polished restraint. "Shall we return to the Emperor's dais?" Spencer asked. And though the words were civil, they carried the weight of command. Gregory's smile deepened. "Must you? I was only paying your Duchess the respect she deserves." Diana's stomach tightened. Respect. That was what Gregory always called it, while he sharpened every gesture into scandal. Spencer leaned in just slightly, enough that only she could hear. "Come," he murmured, "now." Not a request, not a plea, a claim spoken like law. Her hand, still faintly warmed by the prince's lips, trembled as she withdrew it and placed it on Spencer's offered arm. The instant her glove touched his sleeve, his muscles went rigid beneath the fine cloth, as if her closeness burned, as if he had been starving and did not know how to admit it. They walked through the ballroom in silence. Whispers rose behind them like wind through dead leaves. Diana kept her posture perfect. Inside, she felt strangely unsteady, because she had not married Spencer Hector for affection. She had married him because her family had fallen from grace. Her mother's jewels had been sold one by one, and the last creditors had begun to circle like carrion birds. The Emperor had decreed every duke of military standing must take a bride, to anchor loyalty, to secure heirs, to silence rumors of disloyalty. Spencer needed a wife. She needed safety, and the terms had been clear. No sharing quarters, no interference in his affairs, no public scandal, a marriage of appearances for 2 years. A sealed bargain, a cage lined with velvet. She remembered arriving at Ashford House in her wrinkled traveling dress after the long, jolting ride, stepping down from the carriage without a hand offered, without even a footman in sight. The mansion had loomed gray and severe, its gardens clipped into rigid shapes that felt more like punishment than beauty. An elderly butler had finally appeared, bowing with mechanical precision. "Duchess Ashford, I am Mr. Carlson. His Grace instructed me to show you to the East Wing." "And the Duke?" Diana had asked, though she already knew the answer. "Training with his regiment, my lady. He will return before nightfall." Of course he would. Even on the day he acquired a wife, he had chosen discipline over greeting. The East Wing had been exquisite, silent, choking. Rooms furnished like a gallery, silk draperies in pale gray, gilded mirrors, flowers arranged with mathematical precision. Gowns she had not chosen already hung in wardrobes. Jewels she had not requested sat in velvet-lined drawers. And on her writing desk, placed deliberately at the center, had been the contract. 12 rules, her signature at the bottom like a surrender. That first evening she had walked into the vast dining room at 7 precisely and found Spencer seated at the head of a table meant for 20, his expression carved from ice. He had stood as courtesy demanded. "Duchess," he had said, voice controlled. "Welcome to Ashford." "Your Grace," she had replied. And she had sat at the far end of the table, miles away from him beneath chandeliers that could not warm anything. They had eaten in silence while the clock ticked like judgment. "Your quarters are satisfactory?" he had asked at last, not looking at her. "They are adequate. If you require anything, inform Mr. Carlson." "I require nothing." His jaw had tightened at that, as if her refusal was an inconvenience. She had stared across the polished wood at the man who owned her name and none of her heart. "Good," she had said softly. "Then we understand one another." And they had, until the prince arrived in their lives, until dinners had shifted from silence to strategy, the Duke's eyes lifting to her face for the first time when she dared suggest a diplomatic solution to a border dispute, until his voice said her name once, awkwardly, as if it tasted unfamiliar. And now the prince had kissed her hand. Now Spencer's control had cracked in public. And as he guided her away from the center of the ballroom toward a shadowed corridor, Diana realized something with a cold, sinking certainty. If the Duke of Ashford was finally beginning to want her, it might be far too late to keep her safe from the scandal his wanting would bring. Because Prince Gregory Duncan did not chase women for love. He chased them for conquest. And he had just declared war. The Duke did not speak until they were beyond the ballroom doors. The music dulled behind them. The corridor smelled of beeswax and old stone, lit by sconces that threw gold over portraits of long-dead royals who seemed to watch for weakness. Diana kept her hand on Spencer's arm because the court would expect it, yet she could feel the tremor beneath his sleeve, tight restraint holding something violent in place. "You allowed him," Spencer said at last. The words were soft. That was what made them dangerous. Diana's spine stiffened. "Allowed him what, Your Grace?" His gaze cut to her, sharp and dark. "To take your hand, to hold you, to kiss you as though you were unclaimed." Heat rose in her cheeks, humiliation first, then anger. It was a courtesy. A performance, he corrected, each syllable precise, one designed for witnesses. "And you took the bait perfectly," she said before she could stop herself. He halted. The corridor seemed to narrow around them. For a moment she thought he might raise his voice, might finally let the ton see the temper rumored behind his discipline. Instead, he leaned closer, and his restraint felt far more frightening than fury. "You will not speak to him alone again," he said. Diana's heart gave a hard, offended beat. "You do not command my conversations." His mouth tightened. "I command this marriage." She laughed, quietly, bitterly. "This marriage? You mean the contract you keep in a safe as though I am a document to be protected?" The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Spencer's eyes flickered, as if she had struck him somewhere he did not expect to feel pain. Then he looked away, toward the ballroom doors where laughter spilled out like champagne. "Come," he said, "we must return." Return, as if nothing had happened. As if her hand had not been kissed like a promise. As if his goblet had not broken in his grip. As if the ton had not just smelled blood. They re-entered the ballroom together. At once the whispers changed tone. They did not soften, never that. But they sharpened, sliding from curiosity into calculation. Diana felt it on her skin. 100 eyes measuring the distance between her and the Duke, noting the angle of his arm, the tightness of his jaw, the unnatural stillness of his face. The Emperor stood at the dais beneath the grand canopy, smiling benignly as though he did not rule through fear and favor in equal measure. Near him, several ladies leaned in their glittering circles like swans, beautiful, vicious creatures who lived for the slightest stumble. Diana greeted them with perfect composure. Inside she was trembling. Because she understood the truth, the Duke refused to speak aloud. Prince Gregory's kiss had not been flirtation. It had been an accusation, a public suggestion that the Duke of Ashford could not keep his wife's devotion, and in this society a woman's reputation was her shield and her shackle. She was speaking to Lady Marlowe when the prince appeared again, smooth as silk, eyes bright with triumph. "Duchess," he said, bowing over her hand as if the earlier insult had been nothing. "You fled so swiftly I feared you might faint." "I did not flee," Diana replied, her smile polite enough to cut. "I walked with my husband." "Oh." Gregory's gaze slid deliberately toward Spencer, who stood a few paces away in conversation with a general. "How loyal." Diana's stomach turned. The prince's charm was a blade with a velvet hilt. Society adored him because he made cruelty sound like wit. "You look exquisite tonight," he continued, voice lowering. "Tell me, does His Grace ever praise you?" Diana kept her expression calm. "His Grace does not waste words." "How tragic." Gregory sighed as though he were grieving for her. "A woman like you should be treasured aloud." She felt the trap again. If she rebuffed him too sharply, she would appear ungrateful for royal favor. If she entertained him, she would confirm the whispers he wanted to ignite. So she chose the only power she truly had: restraint. "Your Highness is too generous," she said, and turned away before he could press closer. But Gregory merely smiled because he enjoyed resistance. It made the pursuit sweeter. A little later, Spencer approached her again, the general falling away with hurried deference. "Stay near me," he murmured, eyes fixed forward as if the words were not meant for her but for the air itself. She wanted to snap at him. She wanted to remind him that for 6 months he had not cared where she stood, who spoke to her, what she felt. But then she saw his hand, bandaged, white linen wrapped tightly around his palm, already stained faintly with red where the broken glass had cut deep. A strange twist of emotion tightened her throat, something dangerously close to concern. "You injured yourself," she said. His gaze flicked to her face. "It is nothing." "It is blood," she replied. "You may call it nothing, but the court has already called it something." His jaw worked once, a sign of strain she had learned to notice only recently. "Do you know what Gregory wants?" he asked. "To win," Diana said simply. Spencer's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want?" The question hit harder than she expected, because it was the first time he had ever asked. Not about a treaty, not about a border, about her. Diana's fingers tightened around her fan. She forced her voice steady. "I want to survive," she said. "With my family intact, with my sister safe, with my mother housed, with my dignity, if society will allow it." Something shifted in his gaze, an emotion flickering like a flame struggling against wind. Then, as if he feared what he might reveal, he looked away. The waltz began. Couples moved to the floor in a sweep of color and perfume. Gregory, of course, appeared at Diana's side again, offering his hand with practiced ease. "Dance with me," he said. "It will quiet the whispers." It would do the opposite. Diana hesitated, pulse loud in her ears. She glanced toward Spencer. He stood very still, too still, a duke who could command armies, and yet seemed unwilling to move 3 steps to claim his own wife. And in that hesitation the prince's smile deepened as if he already knew the answer, because he had learned the duke's weakness, and now he meant to exploit hers. Diana did not take the prince's hand, not because she trusted Spencer to save her, but because she refused to let Gregory Duncan write the story of her ruin. "My dance card is promised," she said, and the lie tasted like iron. Gregory's brows rose with theatrical surprise. "Promised to whom?" Diana turned slowly, deliberately toward her husband, Every whisper within 10 feet seemed to hush. Spencer stood as if carved from midnight stone, his military sash stark against his black coat, the bandage at his palm a pale insult to his composure. For half a heartbeat his face revealed nothing. Then his gaze met hers, and something, brief, violent, almost panicked, flashed there as though he had not expected her to choose him. Diana lifted her chin. "Your Grace," she said, loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. "Will you dance with your wife?" A ripple went through the crowd, a duchess asking, a duke hesitating. Prince Gregory's smile sharpened, as though he had just moved a piece on the chessboard and was waiting for blood. Spencer's jaw tightened once, then he stepped forward. He did not smile, he did not soften. He simply offered his uninjured hand with the gravity of a man offering terms on a battlefield. "Yes," he said. One word, but the court heard it like a cannon. Diana placed her gloved fingers into his. His grip was careful, too careful, like he feared crushing her the way he had crushed the goblet. As they moved onto the dance floor, Diana felt the weight of attention like a physical pressure. The waltz swept them into motion. Spencer's hand settled at her waist with rigid propriety, yet the contact sent a shock through her body, not from desire. She would not grant him that weakness so easily, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of being held by her husband at last. "You have never danced with me," she murmured, keeping her smile in place for the watching faces. "You have never asked," he returned. His voice was even, controlled, but his eyes were not. They tracked the room, the prince, the whispers, every threat. "You did not stop him," Diana said softly, "when he kissed my hand." Spencer's mouth tightened. "I stopped myself." "That is not comfort, Your Grace." A pause. The music turned them, skirts and coats brushing past, the scent of crushed flowers and warm candle wax filling the air. When Spencer spoke again, it was lower. "Gregory Duncan enjoys humiliating men who cannot respond." "And women," Diana said. Spencer's gaze flicked to her, quick, sharp, then away again, as if he did not wish to admit he understood. "You should not be alone with him," he said. Diana's laughter came out under her breath. "Now you care about my solitude." His hand at her waist tightened by the smallest degree. "It is not care," he said too quickly. It was the same lie he always used. Order, reputation, duty, anything but truth. Diana's throat tightened, anger and ache braided together. "Then do not speak to me as though I am careless with myself. I have been careful every day since I entered your house. Careful with my words. Careful with my face. Careful not to offend your rules." The word rules landed like a slap. Spencer's steps did not falter, but something in his breath changed. Shallow, controlled, as if he had to force air into his lungs. "You wanted those rules," he said. "I accepted them," she corrected, "because I had no other choice." There it was, the truth she never said aloud. The Tun believed she had married well, rescued from disgrace by a powerful duke. Only Diana knew how desperate her mother's hands had been when she signed the last agreement. Only Diana remembered the creditors at their gate, the threats wrapped in politeness. Only Diana knew her sister's future was tied to the Duke's coin and the Duke's signature. She saw Spencer's gaze flicker, uncertain now, as if he was meeting a version of her he had never allowed himself to consider. "You were eager," he said quietly. "You signed without hesitation." "Because hesitation is a luxury," Diana replied, voice steady though her heart was not. "For women like me." The waltz ended. Applause rose, polite and glittering. Spencer did not release her immediately. For a moment, his hand stayed at her waist, fingers pressing through fabric with the faintest tremor. Then he stepped back, bowing with perfect ducal formality. But his eyes lingered on her face, searching, almost hungry, for something he could not name. Before Diana could gather herself, Prince Gregory appeared again, clapping slowly as though amused. "How touching," he said. "The Duke remembers he has a wife." Diana's cheeks warmed with humiliation, but Spencer moved first. He placed himself half a step closer to Diana, an instinctive shield. It was small, But it was the first protective act he had ever offered her without being asked. "You will address the Duchess with respect," Spencer said. Gregory's smile widened. "I do. I respect her, far more than her husband seems to." The prince's gaze slid to Diana, intimate and dangerous. "Tell me," Gregory murmured, "is it true you live in separate wings?" The question struck like a thrown stone. Diana's breath caught, because it meant the servants had spoken. It meant society already knew. And Spencer went still in a way that felt like a door slamming shut. He looked at Diana then, not with anger this time, with something that resembled fear. Because if the court believed she was a wife in name only, then she was prey. And Spencer Hector, cold Duke of Ashford, had just realized the prince had been hunting her from the start. Diana did not answer the prince. Silence was safer than denial. If she denied it, she confirmed it mattered. If she admitted it, she handed him the knife and asked him to carve. So she smiled, small, controlled, and let her gaze drift past Gregory's shoulder as if he were merely a passing inconvenience. "My household arrangements are not a subject for public amusement, Your Highness." Gregory's eyes glinted. "Public? Forgive me, I forgot how private your marriage is." Spencer's voice cut in, low and lethal. "Enough." The prince only bowed, enjoying himself far too much. "Of course. I would not wish to provoke your temper, Ashford. It might become educational for the room." He retreated with that same careless grace, leaving behind a wake of murmurs. Diana felt them everywhere now, like insects crawling beneath silk. Spencer's hand appeared at her elbow, steering her with decisive pressure toward a side passage lined with marble busts. "You will come," he said. "Not please, not Diana." A command again. Her temper flared. "Do you intend to drag me about like a troublesome parcel whenever the prince speaks?" Spencer did not slow. "I intend to prevent him from destroying you." The word struck harder than his grip. "Destroy you, not us, not my reputation, you." They reached an antechamber, quiet, hung with heavy velvet drapes that muffled the gala's music to a distant throb. A fire burned low in the grate, throwing amber light over Spencer's severe profile. He released her elbow as though he had burned himself. Diana turned to face him, chest rising too quickly. "You cannot command me only when it suits you," she said. "You cannot ignore me for months and then become possessive because a prince kisses my hand." Spencer's jaw flexed. "Possessive?" "Yes." She stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated by the height of him, the breadth of him, the reputation that made men obey. "That is what this is. A sudden urge to claim what you have never cared to keep." His eyes darkened, and for the first time she saw the fracture in his control. Not anger. Conflict. Something desperate under discipline. "You think I did not care," he said quietly. "I think," Diana replied, voice trembling with contained fury, "that you cared about your schedule, your uniforms, your maps, your rules, and you cared enough about me to keep me respectable and silent, like an ornament placed where it would not offend your life." The silence between them tightened. Spencer dragged a breath in through his nose as if he had learned that technique on battlefields to steady himself before killing. "You are wrong," he said, but there was no certainty in it. Diana laughed once, sharp, soft. "Am I? Then tell me, Your Grace. When was the last time you asked after my mother? My sister? When did you last step into the East Wing without a reason?" His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then lifted again, hard as though he hated himself for noticing. "You should not speak of your family," he said. And it was the strangest thing, almost a warning. Diana froze. "Why?" Spencer looked toward the drapes, the closed door, the crack beneath it, as if he expected ears on the other side. Then he reached into the inner pocket of his coat and withdrew a folded paper. Not a dance card, not an invitation, a letter. The seal was broken. The handwriting, her mother's. Diana's stomach turned over. "Where did you get that?" Spencer held it as if it weighed more than steel. "It arrived at Ashford House 3 days ago." Her throat went tight. Why was it not given to me? Because it was addressed to me. That made no sense. Her mother had never written to Spencer directly. Her mother barely tolerated the idea of him. Spencer unfolded the letter and did something Diana had never seen him do. He hesitated, as if reading it again would cut. "I will not pretend I did not open it," he said. "The seal was already broken when it reached my desk." Diana's voice came out thin. "Read it." Spencer's gaze lifted to hers. "You should sit." "I will not sit," Diana snapped, fear sharpening her pride. "Read it." Spencer looked down, and his voice changed, just slightly, when he spoke the words. "Your Grace," he read. "Forgive a mother who writes with shame. We are grateful for the relief you have provided, and yet I must beg you, do not cast my daughter away when the time comes." Diana's fingers curled. "That is—" Spencer continued, relentless. "Her father's debts were not our only ruin. There is another matter, one that would destroy her should it reach the court. Diana has carried this burden in silence for years." Diana's blood went cold. Spencer's eyes flicked up, searching her face as if he had been searching since the letter arrived. "Please," he read, voice lower now. "Do not let the prince discover the truth. He has begun asking questions. He has always enjoyed breaking what is already cracked." The room tilted. Diana felt the floor vanish beneath her slippers. "What truth?" Spencer asked softly, letter lowering in his hand. His voice was restrained, but something in his eyes was no longer simply jealousy. It was fear, because he finally understood Gregory was not flirting for sport. He was digging. He was hunting a secret. Diana swallowed hard, forcing air into her lungs. Her mind raced. Her mother's desperation, the broken seal, the prince's pointed question about separate wings, the way he watched her like he already sensed an opening. And then Spencer spoke again, the last line like a blade drawn slow. "Tell me," he said, "what have you been hiding that even I was not meant to know?" Diana's vision blurred, not from tears, from the sheer terror of the answer, because if Spencer knew, the court would know. And if the court knew, she would lose everything. For a long moment, Diana could only hear the muffled music beyond the drapes and the low pop of the fire. Her palms were cold. Her mouth felt too dry to speak. Spencer waited, still as a statue, letter hanging at his side. Yet his gaze was fixed on her with a steadiness that made her feel stripped bare. Not like a man demanding confession, like a man bracing for a wound. "I have hidden nothing that concerns you," Diana said at last. The lie was thin. They both heard it. Spencer's jaw tightened. "It concerns me if the prince can use it against you." Diana's breath caught. "Why should that matter to you?" There it was. The question she had carried like a stone since the first silent dinner, since the first rule, since the first night she slept alone under a roof that belonged to her husband and still felt like exile. Why should it matter? Because if he answered honestly, the world would change. And if he did not, she would know she had been foolish to hope. Spencer's voice came out rougher than before. "Because he touched you." That is not an answer. Spencer looked away, as if the room suddenly held too much light. "Because he will destroy you for amusement, and I will not allow that." Diana's chest tightened with something painful and humiliating, not comfort, not relief, rage. "Do you hear yourself?" she whispered. "You speak as though I am a territory to defend, a possession threatened by another man." Spencer's gaze snapped back to her. "You are my wife." "I am your wife on paper," Diana said, the words trembling despite her effort to steady them. "In name, in law. But you have treated me like a convenient arrangement." Something flickered across his face, pain, quickly buried. "You never protested," he said. "I never could," Diana replied, and the truth escaped before she could cage it again. "Because I owed you, because my family's survival was attached to your signature. Do you think that makes me free to demand affection?" Spencer's fingers tightened around the letter until the paper creased. "So it is about your family." Diana laughed once, bitter. "Everything is about my family. That is what you bought, Your Grace. My silence, my obedience, my gratitude." Spencer flinched at the word bought. The briefest movement, but she saw it, and suddenly she hated herself for seeing him as human, because it made her want something she could not safely want. Spencer set the letter down on a side table as though it burned him. "Tell me," he said again, quieter. "What is it?" Diana's throat worked. Her mind flashed to candle-lit rooms, to whispered arrangements, to the careful lies her mother had taught her to tell, to the small life kept hidden in the country, far from London's gaze, to the thing that would not disappear simply because she had married a duke. She shook her head. "No." Spencer's eyes narrowed. "No? No," she repeated, voice stronger now, "because if I tell you, you will look at me differently." His mouth tightened. "I already am." That hit hard. Diana turned away, staring at the velvet drapes as if she could see through them into the ballroom, into the glittering safety of pretending nothing mattered. "You read a letter not meant for you," she said, "and now you wish to interrogate me?" "I wish to protect you," Spencer said. "I do not want protection," Diana snapped, spinning back. "I want respect. I want you to stop stepping into my life only when another man threatens your pride." Spencer went very still. Then slowly he stepped closer, not invading, measured, yet each step felt like a shift in power. His voice dropped. "You think this is pride? What else is it?" He stopped an arm's length away. The firelight carved harsh angles into his face, made him look older, more tired, less invincible than the Ton imagined. "You do not know what it costs," he said quietly, "to stand in a room and watch another man mark you." Diana's breath caught not from the words alone, but from the fact that he said you, not my Duchess, not my wife, you. Something unsteady rose in her chest, hope dangerous as flame near oil. "You cost yourself nothing," Diana said, trying to stay sharp, trying not to soften. "You have walls, you have rules, you have distance." Spencer's gaze dipped to the hollow of her throat, bare, unadorned, her necklace absent because she refused his diamonds. He looked away again as if that softness offended him. "I do not know how to remove the walls," he admitted, barely audible. Diana's heart stuttered. It was not a confession of love, but it was the first time he had ever admitted weakness. She swallowed. "Then do not pretend you can protect me. Walls do not save women in this world. They only hide them until someone decides to tear the roof away." Spencer's mouth opened, then closed. He seemed to weigh something. Then he said very carefully, "The prince has been seen sending gifts before he takes what he wants." Diana's skin turned cold. "He cannot take what I do not give." Spencer's gaze held hers. "A scandal does not require consent." The words landed like a blow, because she knew he was right. A whisper could ruin her faster than truth ever could. A single insinuation about her past, about what her mother had hinted, could destroy her, her sister, and the fragile shelter she had built. Her fingers clenched at her skirt. "Then what do you want from me?" Spencer's answer came after a beat. "I want you to trust me," he said, "with whatever truth the prince is hunting." Diana stared at him, heart pounding. Trust. The one thing she had not been able to afford. And yet, for the first time, Spencer's face did not look cold. It looked afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of losing her. Outside the antechamber, the music swelled into a brighter tune. A footman's shadow passed beneath the door. The gala moved on. Society feasted on whispers. And Diana realized with sick clarity that her secret was no longer hers alone to carry. The prince had begun digging. The duke had begun caring. And she stood between them, holding a truth that could burn everything to ash. The antechamber door opened without a knock. A footman stepped in, eyes lowered, voice careful. "Your Grace." Her Majesty requests the Duchess's presence in the blue salon. Diana's stomach dropped. The blue salon was not a casual request. It was where the Empress gathered the women of rank like jewels laid out for inspection, where reputations were praised or snapped in two with a single elegant remark. Spencer's expression hardened instantly, as if he had just heard the click of a rifle being cocked. Diana forced her face into calm. "Of course." The footman bowed and withdrew. Spencer's hand shot out. stopping her not by grasping her wrist but by catching the air near it, then closing on her gloved fingers with careful restraint. "Do not go alone," he said. Her pulse spiked. "You cannot enter the blue salon." "I can stand outside it," he replied, eyes dark, "and if Gregory appears—" "Gregory will not appear there," Diana cut in. "He is a man." Spencer's mouth tightened. "Then whoever is speaking for him will." That chilled her more than the prince himself. Because men like Gregory did not always ruin women with their own hands. They used other women. Diana gently pulled her fingers free. "I know how to survive women's rooms, Your Grace. I have done it all my life." "And have you done it as a duchess?" Spencer asked. "With the court watching for your fall?" She held his gaze. "If they want me to fall, I will fall with my spine straight." For a heartbeat, Spencer looked as if he might say something real, something that did not fit inside rule and duty. Instead, he nodded once. "Then I will be in the corridor. If you need me, you will come out." Diana turned to leave, then stopped. "And if I cannot come out?" Spencer's answer was immediate. "Then I will come in." It was impossible. It was scandal. But the certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. She walked away before she could show that it affected her. The blue salon glowed with pale light and soft laughter. A quartet played something delicate. The air smelled of rose water and hot tea. Ladies in silk and feathers clustered around gilt chairs, their smiles sharp enough to draw blood. The Empress sat like a painted icon at the far end, radiant, serene, eyes that missed nothing. Diana curtsied low. "Your Majesty." "Duchess Ashford." The Empress's voice was sweet. "Come nearer. Let us look at you." Diana stepped forward, aware of every whisper behind fans. She felt eyes on her throat, bare, unadorned, where a certain diamond necklace should have been. The Empress's gaze lingered there for a fraction too long. "How very restrained," Her Majesty murmured. "One would almost think you refuse your husband's gifts." A ripple of quiet amusement moved through the room. Diana kept her smile smooth. "His Grace's generosity is well known. I prefer simplicity." "Ah." The Empress sipped her tea. "Simplicity is admirable, but it is not always wise. A woman must sometimes display what she is given, to prevent others from thinking she is ungiven." Heat rose in Diana's cheeks. The remark was delicate, but its meaning was brutal. Ungiven, unclaimed, unloved. A lady leaned in, Lady Ravensmere, infamous for friendly cruelty. "Your Majesty, surely the Duke is too occupied with his regiment to notice such details." Another lady giggled. "Or perhaps the Duchess is too occupied with princes." The word princes drifted through the room like smoke. Diana's spine went cold, so it had reached them already. Lady Ravensmere smiled at Diana over the rim of her cup. "Tell us, Duchess, does Prince Gregory often pay you such particular attention?" "He is known to be generous." Diana kept her chin high. "His Highness is courteous to many, but not to all," the Empress said softly. "He chooses favorites." The salon quieted. Every woman leaned in, hungry for a crack. Diana felt her pulse in her throat loud as a drum. This was not idle gossip. This was an interrogation dressed as tea, and then Lady Ravensmere delivered the knife, still smiling. "Of course," she said. "It is difficult to keep a husband's devotion when one does not even share his wing." The room stilled. Fans paused mid-flick. Someone made a tiny sound of delighted shock. Diana's vision narrowed. So Gregory had not merely whispered, he had planted it. And now the Empress herself watched Diana with polite curiosity, as though she were a puzzle to be solved. Diana forced her breath steady. "My household is arranged for His Grace's comfort. The West Wing adjoins his study and the armory." "And the East Wing?" the Empress asked. "Adjoins what?" Diana tasted blood where she bit the inside of her cheek. "Books, silence, a contract on a desk, a cage." "It adjoins the gardens," Diana said, "which are quieter." Lady Ravensmere's smile widened. How poetic. A duchess kept among flowers while her husband keeps among steel. A few ladies laughed softly. Humiliation burned behind Diana's ribs, not because they knew, But because Spencer had allowed it to be true, she gathered her dignity like a cloak. "If the court wishes to discuss my marriage," Diana said, voice calm despite the trembling in her hands, "it may do so openly. Whispering is such a common habit." Silence. A few widened eyes. The Empress's brows lifted, slightly impressed, slightly amused. Then Her Majesty leaned back, studying Diana with slow interest. "Bold," the Empress murmured, "very bold." And then, like a gentle dagger sliding in, she added, "Tell me, Duchess, is it true that your family has another scandal waiting beneath the surface? Something Prince Gregory has taken an interest in?" Diana's lungs stopped, because now it was not about wings. It was about the secret, the one her mother had hinted at in that letter. The one Gregory was digging for. Diana felt the room tilt, felt the weight of eyes, of judgment, of power. And in the corridor beyond the door, she knew Spencer was standing guard, unable to hear, unable to help unless she broke decorum and fled. Her fingers clenched at her skirt. One wrong word here could ruin her forever. And the Empress was smiling, waiting. Diana held the Empress's gaze and felt with terrifying clarity how easily a woman could be destroyed by someone who never raised their voice. Around them, the blue salon glittered, silk, pearls, rose water, laughter held behind fans. A hunting ground dressed as tea. "I am not aware of any scandal," Diana said carefully, each word placed like a chess piece. "Only old rumors that grow teeth when fed." Lady Ravensmere's smile sharpened. "And yet, Prince Gregory is rarely hungry without cause." The Empress set her cup down with delicate finality. "We shall not pretend, Duchess, the court has eyes. The prince has interests. And your husband," a pause soft as satin, "has suddenly developed a temper." A faint titter ran through the room. Diana's cheeks warmed with humiliation she refused to show. Then the salon doors opened. A footman announced, voice strained, "His Grace, the Duke of Ashford." Every head snapped toward the entrance. Spencer stood framed in the doorway like a storm-given human shape. Dark coat immaculate, posture rigid, the bandage at his hand stark against the black. Men were not meant to enter this room. Not without permission, not without consequence. The Empress did not rise. She simply watched him, expression serene, as if she had expected this. "My apologies, Your Majesty," Spencer said, bowing with formal precision. "But my wife has been summoned for some time. I feared she might be unwell." Diana's heart thudded painfully. He had come in. He had done the impossible. Lady Ravensmere's eyes gleamed. How gallant. Or perhaps, how concerned. Spencer did not look at Ravensmere. He looked only at Diana. And for the first time, in front of the most dangerous women in the Empire, he let his voice soften. "Come," he said, "with me." It was not a command now. It was an offering, a public decision. Diana rose slowly, hands steady though everything inside her shook. She crossed the room and placed her fingers in Spencer's uninjured hand. The salon whispered. The Empress's gaze drifted to their joined hands, then to Diana's bare throat and back again. "So," Her Majesty murmured, "the Duke claims what he purchased after all." The words were velvet-wrapped cruelty. Spencer's jaw tightened, but he did not retreat. He drew Diana closer, just a fraction, enough for the women watching to see it. "Your Majesty," Spencer said, voice controlled, "I did not purchase my wife." Diana's breath caught. He was doing it. He was stepping away from the old lie. The Empress's smile turned faintly amused. "Then what is she to you, Your Grace?" The room held its breath. Diana felt Spencer's thumb shift, barely against her glove, a subtle signal of nervousness disguised as steadiness. Then he said, each word quiet, brutal in its honesty, "She is under my protection." Lady Ravensmere gave a soft laugh. "How very military." Spencer's eyes flashed. "And under my name, and under your roof," another lady murmured, hungry, "but not under your wing." Spencer's gaze did not waver. "That changes." A ripple of shock. Diana's pulse roared. The Empress leaned forward. "Changes? How?" Spencer held the room with the same calm that had commanded regiments, only now it was aimed at society itself. My wife will no longer be treated as an arrangement, he said, nor as an ornament, nor as a convenient silence to be displayed when required and ignored when not. A pause. Then with slow, deliberate clarity, anyone who wishes to speak of my marriage may do so to me, directly. The salon went still, because this was not merely defense. It was a claim, a line drawn in public. Diana stared at him, the breath caught in her throat threatening to become something dangerous. Hope, warmth, an ache she had denied herself for months. The Empress studied Spencer as if assessing a blade's sharpness. And the prince? She asked softly. Will you speak to him directly as well? Spencer's expression turned to ice. Yes. The imperial masquerade continued outside the blue salon like a living creature. Music swelling, laughter ringing, masks glittering under chandeliers. Spencer did not escort Diana to a quiet corner. He did not hide her. He led her back into the ballroom, straight into the light. Whispers followed them like shadows. And there, near the center of the room, stood Prince Gregory Duncan in white and gold, radiant with amusement, until he saw Spencer's face. Ah, Gregory said, smiling. The Duke has learned to misbehave. Spencer stopped before him, keeping Diana at his side, not behind him, at his side. Equal. Gregory's gaze slid to Diana's hand on Spencer's arm. Is she obedient tonight? Diana stiffened. Spencer answered before she could. She is not obedient, Spencer said calmly. She is my wife. The prince laughed softly. On paper, Spencer's voice lowered. On every page that matters. Gregory's smile thinned. Be careful, Ashford. Men have fallen for less than this sort of obsession. Something in Spencer's gaze sharpened, almost merciless. I have already fallen, he said. The words hit the air like a dropped glass. The nearest circle of nobles stilled mid-conversation. A lady gasped behind her fan. Diana's heart stopped. Spencer did not look at them. He looked at Diana, and in the full blaze of the ballroom, before princes and generals and whispering women, he said, voice rougher now, stripped of polish, I will not pretend I do not want you. Diana's breath shuddered. Her mind screamed of contracts and rules and survival. Her heart, traitor, wanted to run toward him. Gregory's expression hardened. How touching. But wanting does not change reality. She is bound and you made the chains. Diana flinched. Spencer's hand tightened around hers. Then, without looking away from her, he spoke words that made the world tilt. Then I break them. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. Not a letter, not an invitation, a contract. Diana recognized the thick parchment instantly. The 12 rules, the signatures at the bottom like shackles. A hush spread outward as Spencer held it up. The prince's smile faltered for the first time. What is that? Gregory demanded. Spencer's gaze did not flick to him. This, Spencer said, is the lie I called a marriage. He turned to the emperor's dais, to the highest authority in the room, to the power that had forced this union into existence. Your Majesty, Spencer said, voice carrying. I entered this marriage under decree. I honored the decree. I gave the Duchess my name and protection, but I failed her as a husband. Diana's throat tightened. Spencer's eyes glinted, not with pride now, but with something that looked like penance. I request amendment, he said. Not to the decree, only to my conduct. I will live with my wife as a husband should. I will claim her openly. And if any man, prince or otherwise, attempts to disgrace her, he will answer to me. The emperor's gaze was unreadable. The empress watched with quiet interest. Then, after a pause that felt endless, the emperor lifted his hand in the smallest gesture of permission. A silent, proceed. Spencer turned back to Diana. He held the contract between them. His voice dropped, so only she could truly hear the shape of the words. You said you wanted a decision, he murmured. Here it is. And then he tore the parchment. Once, twice. The sound was shockingly loud, like chains breaking. The pieces fell into his hand like dead leaves. Diana's breath hitched. A woman without a contract was a woman without protection. Unless her husband offered something stronger. Unless he offered himself. Spencer leaned closer, his eyes, usually cold, were burning now with fear and sincerity. "I will clear your family's debts regardless," he said softly. "Your sister will remain funded. Your mother will remain housed. Not because you owe me, but because I choose it." Diana's vision blurred. "Spencer," she whispered. He swallowed, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the Duke, uncertain, raw, and the secret. He added, quieter still, "Whatever it is, you will tell me when you are ready. Not because I demand it, because I want to know you, not own you." Her chest cracked open at that, because it was what she had wanted and never dared to request. Diana turned her face slightly, aware of the court's hungry eyes. "Prince Gregory wants to ruin me," she said, voice barely audible. Spencer's thumb brushed her glove. "He will not." "And if he does," she whispered, "if he uncovers what my mother fears?" Spencer's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Then he will learn," he said, "that your disgrace is not yours to carry alone." Diana's breath shook. The ballroom waited. The prince watched like a predator denied his meal, and Diana realized the power had shifted, not because Spencer was jealous, because he was choosing publicly to stand with her. She lifted her chin and turned toward the prince. "Your Highness," she said, voice clear, "you may stop sending gifts. You may stop whispering to servants. You may stop circling my name like a vulture." Gregory's eyes narrowed. "And if I do not?" Diana felt Spencer's hand firm at her side like a vow. "Then you will find," she said, "that I am not as easy to break as you hoped." A dangerous smile curved Gregory's mouth, but it was thinner now, less certain, because the cold Duke had finally stepped out of his fortress, and the Duchess was no longer alone in the open. Spencer leaned down, his voice soft enough to be intimate, loud enough to be understood by those nearest. "Dance with me," he said, "truly, not for show." Diana hesitated. One heartbeat, the last of her fear wrestling with the first of her want. Then she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Spencer led her onto the floor, and as the music rose and they moved together for the first time like a real husband and wife, the court watched in stunned silence. Because the feared Duke held his Duchess as if she were precious, not purchased, not displayed, chosen. Truth remained, sharp as a hidden blade. Prince Gregory had not lost interest. He had simply changed tactics, and Diana's secret, whatever it was, still waited in the shadows, ready to demand its price.